I didn't think I was going to be able to teach some more material from Proverbs 31, but I didn't cover all my material that I had for last Sunday, and I've got much more material that I already had. And so we decided that we would come back here this morning and still felt a good little fire and passion for Proverbs 31. I want you to remember that this is that Proverbs that we've always traditionally taken as the proverb of the virtuous woman. Now, I spent a lot of time last week with verses 1 through 9, more than I really wanted to spend, but did spend quite a bit of time there. We talked about this verse, who can find a virtuous and capable wife? She is more precious than rubies. Let me get to my spot here. I believe the King James actually doesn't translate it to wife, but woman. Who can find a virtuous woman? So there's a couple of things that we need to make mention here that I did not make mention last Sunday. That when we talk about Proverbs 31, there's a couple of things here that women in general, from my studies and my observations and my research. Let me call it research, because when you're a male and you're teaching a traditional scripture that most women feel that are to them, you better do your research on it. I told you last week that, in all honesty, that this, if we take the first 9 verses, Jewish tradition tells us that this is Solomon. It's written to Solomon, or spoken to Solomon, or sung to Solomon from his mother Bathsheba. King Lemuel, folklore tells us, Jewish folklore, that that's actually Solomon is who this is talking about. And this is advice from his mother. Now, so we see then in context that this proverb is maybe written to a man, a king, right? A head of a kingdom. But we also realize when we look at some of this, it's laying out and celebrating these characteristics of a very wise woman. There may be another level that we need to approach when we look at Proverbs 31, and I'll probably close with that, because I always like to close when I think I'm going to be I'm not scheduled to teach out here for quite some time after last week. So I'm going to leave you with like a cliffhanger. You know how like a movie leaves you with a cliffhanger and you want to go watch the next version of it. So I want to leave you with just maybe something at the very end for you to think about and observe that may be another level of our study. But for the majority, when you research and look, we obviously know that this lays out some very distinct and virtuous characteristics of what we feel to be a woman, a wife even. Now, you can study, I've just researched so many different people. You can study, say 10 or 15 different commentaries, and they'll be split pretty evenly with this being a wife, because it talks about some things that would happen in matrimony, after matrimony. Obviously, it characterizes many things as a husband. So I think there's a great importance here that there's a atmosphere of a husband-wife relationship going on here. That's evident there. But I think there's also a premises that when we look at the original word, it could mean wife or woman. So that would entail also that somebody that is not married, a female that is not married, that has not been wed to a husband, these characteristics also need to be applied to them. A single woman, a woman that maybe has aspirations for matrimony in the life. Now, I thought about this too when I started doing some more research this week. I told you I really saw some new stuff in this last week, and I thought there'd be a great series of teaching that could go along with this, and that I might break it up and teach several sessions from Proverbs 31. But as I continue to look at it and study it here, this virtuous woman could be presented as somebody that has not been married just yet, and is being presented to a potential husband. This is the wife that you should be potentially looking for. This is the woman that you should be looking for. I thought about this. I don't know that you can't get married and get all these characteristics. These characteristics kind of have to be pre-existing or possibly worked on before matrimony ever happens. In other words, my daughters need to be working on these characteristics now before they're ever married. Because it's not get married and that's the poof, they all show up. Obviously they don't. So these are things that they are raised in, these very wise characteristics. Now, I want to continue to preference because there is a common thing that come across when I did my research, and as I've continued to research this, that women feel that Proverbs 31 is such a hard measuring stick, that it is an unattainable measuring stick. And if you look at something throughout the Bible, it is a very tough measuring stick. But I want you to understand, I think it's a great aspiration for women to aspire to these characteristics and continue to cultivate these characteristics. I believe my wife would tell you that she looks at Proverbs 31 and says that she doesn't have, she's not to this level, but she would love to aspire and continue to persevere to be this Proverbs 31 woman. So I want that to be there, that this is not to discourage anybody, that you're not measuring up to what God wants, but that there is characteristics that a male should be looking in a woman, and there's characteristics that a woman should be cultivating all the days of her life to be blessed of God and this aspiring. I want to say my cliffhanger to the end, but if we look at the women in the Bible that God really used, they didn't measure up to Proverbs 31. They were far removed from Proverbs 31. They didn't even match Proverbs 31. I think we had a preacher the other day that was in here, our visitor, and Brother Caldwell, and he talked about Rahab. Rahab didn't match anything that Proverbs 31. She was a prostitute. Now, she was an entrepreneur. She was running a brothel. She was running this great prostitution ring in Jericho. But, she didn't measure up to Proverbs 31. But yet, we see her in Hebrews 11, this great woman of faith. She's in the Hall of Faith. So, I want us to understand that it's something that we do need to aspire to. I think it's very applicable today to men and women both, this text. I think there's probably another level that we need to be looking, because as we start looking at this Proverbs 31 measuring stick, and it's just a tough, we want to be perfect, don't we? We live in the day of perfection. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it I'm going to be single-minded, and I'm going to be perfect in that area. We're specialists. Everything now is specialized. We're specialized in every curriculum field. Everything that I teach at the college, we're all specialized. We specialize students in engineering. We specialize them in math education. We specialize them in being this type of doctor. There's no more really jack of all trades, master of none. You're a specialist. And what we've done, we've created this culture within the United States that, all right, whatever you're going to be, you want to be as perfect as you can. So a lot of times when we read Proverbs 31, we want to be that perfect woman. If we're a male, we want to find that perfect woman. And I want to tell you, they're probably few and far between. I think about the women that really line up with Proverbs 31 are grandmothers. If you want to be if the truth wants to be told, when I find a Proverbs 30, she's a grandma. She's not, she's about the closest thing I can get. Now, why is that? Well, at this point, there is an obvious thing. They're a different generation. They were raised a different way. They saw different things. They're culturally different. That's probably some of the things, because if we don't watch it, our new generations, like my girls, they're in a fast food generation, right? And if we don't watch it, quality and convenience clash. We go for convenience and not quality. But my grandma always believed in quality over convenience. So you see, when we read Proverbs 31, that becomes pretty apparent to us that is something. But also I think about Proverbs 31 for a woman. These may be things that you have, great things, but you continue to cultivate these things as you experience life. And guess what? You make mistakes, you have to overcome those mistakes. And I hate to say it, but there's some things that you can't learn till you make mistakes. Sometimes we don't learn some of our ways of praying. We pray better when we've maybe made mistakes in praying and not praying and things like that. I find that life experience brings a plethora of new advances to your life, of how you do things and how you conduct stuff, how you have consistency in your life, whether it be on your job or church or in your family. I didn't have the consistency that I have today when I was 18-year-old. Now, I had pretty doggone good consistency, more than most 18-year-olds, but I didn't have like I do today, for whatever matter. Now, I do want to highlight this. I've already spoke on this. The original word here in 10, and then we're going to move on because I've already talked about verse 10 a good bit last Sunday, but I did not talk about the original word, yeshah. Okay? That word in the Hebrews in Proverbs 31, it's usually translated to either woman or wife. All right? The New Living Translation, the NIV, and the English Standard Version translated it to wife, probably because of the obvious relationship that we see here with a husband and children in the rest of the passage. So when we take the whole thing in context, it fits better to translate that word to wife instead of woman. But if we look at the King James Version, it's translated as woman. Okay? Which is interesting. Both are very accurate translations of that word. So neither one have really done wrong. I do sense that the word wife might be very applicable when we're looking at maybe another level of this text spiritually. If we look at this from another level and just not a personable way. Here's something that when you study the Bible, you have to be very careful of. We have a tendency to make everything personally to us when we study the Bible. And we forget that some things are they're written for us, but they're not necessarily written to us. Does that make sense? In other words, there's things that are directly written to Israel in the Old Testament. They're written for us to study, but they're not really necessarily written to us. So we have to make sure, because if you always try to make Scripture personal, everything's personal, then you lose deep spiritual meaning sometimes. Genesis is probably the biggest issue. If you just make all of Genesis personal to you, then you're going to lose the great overview of the spiritual meaning of Genesis and the spiritual symbolic essence it has. All right, so as we move on, we talked about it being like rubies. All right, verse 11, did we lose our it crashed. That's no problem. You get it up when you can. I'll get verse 11 up right here. Her husband can trust her, and she will greatly enrich his life. Just a little food for thought there. I was studying this last Sunday, and me and Melissa was at the kitchen table, and I have an office at the college, so I really don't have an office anymore at the house. I've just dissolved any personal space I have anymore and have just freely given it to all my ladies in the house. So I definitely live in a house with 4 queens. They rule all the free space, and I get the coat closet in the hallway for my stuff. So I've kind of dissolved any kind of office space I have and just try to use my office at the college now and just freely give it all to them. Now, my house is up for sale. If anybody likes to purchase it, I need a little bit more space just to hide somewhere. So that's the whole, no, not really. But the girls have outgrew the house, and we've outgrew the bathrooms, and if they all start wearing makeup one day, we're really going to be in trouble. Right now, the only one that wears makeup is the mama. Well, we got a middling that likes to play with it, and then the little one likes to dress more like clown type stuff. It don't really look too good. But I was reading this. She was at the kitchen table. I can't remember. I think I know what she's doing, but if I told you what she's doing at the kitchen table, she'd probably kill me. But anyway, she's at the kitchen table, and I had the laptop sitting at the kitchen table, and I was looking over some stuff, and there's a lot of stuff going on last Sunday morning, just like this Sunday morning or every Sunday morning. And I told her something about this, and I said, Proverbs 11 says that I can trust you and that you greatly enrich my life. And she said, that's a good scripture, that I greatly enrich your life. I said, you're just like a duck egg. And has anybody ever tried a duck egg? A duck egg tastes just like a chicken egg. It's a little bigger than a chicken egg, but it tastes just like you boil that sucker. It is the best boiled egg you've ever ate. Scrambled, I wouldn't recommend it, but a fried egg, you can put it in cakes, and it's a richer egg. It's got a richer taste to it. A duck egg does. And I told Melissa, I said, you know, they talk about them duck eggs being rich. I said, you're just like a duck egg. I mean, you enrich my life. You just give me duck egg, you know. And she looked at me. You know what she done? She went quack quack. I mean, just out of she didn't say nothing, she went quack quack. So I don't know if that helps you this morning or not, but I said, you just like a duck egg, just enriching my life. She goes quack quack. Verse 11 in the New King James tells us that the heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. That's kind of the King James preference. New King James really doesn't change it any, but I read that in the New King James. It says the heart of her husband can safely trust her. I can trust my wife. I can trust this woman. So he, being that husband, will have no lack of gain. There's nothing that I'll lack because of her. Now, I thought about this in a lot of different sense that, you know, I can have a lot of materialistic things, but if I've got a wife that has some pretty tough characteristics to live with, and we're constantly miserable with each other because maybe she and myself are not working on a relationship with God, it doesn't matter what is in my life, I'm going to be miserable. I wish I could just quote the scripture that I'm thinking of right now, but it goes something like it's better to be on a rooftop, right, than with a, what's the word, Joe? Brawling woman, right? I thought that's what it said, but my King James is a little rusty, so... But it's better to be on a rooftop, better to be kind of off by yourself or out of her way, out of the warpath, you might say. I can have a lot of things, but if that relationship with the wife is not right, or if I can't trust that wife with all my heart, it's going to be a pretty rough thing. So I thought, in this sense, it's a pretty good scripture in the sense that, you know what, I can have a lot less, but have great gain in my life. Does that make sense? I'm always trying to we live in a country of just blessedness. I mean, we were really, really blessed. All it takes is going somewhere else to see how blessed we are. Go to any third world country, go to any country that's even halfway equivalent to us, and you'll know how blessed we are. So I'm always trying to keep things in perspective. If I didn't have this materialistic, if I didn't have this house, if I didn't have this job, if I didn't have this position, if I didn't have this platform, would I be satisfied and happy and count myself the luckiest person in the world if I just had my good wife, my great wife, and my children? And we were healthy, we were safe, and maybe we had our necessities took care of, whatever version of the necessities were. And I think I need to keep that, and we as a church family and a country need to keep that in perspective. We can have a lot less but be happy. Now, I'll just tell you, it gets real when we had, like, years ago when the tornadoes and we were out of power. I mean, you go a couple of days without a power and people look like they're fixing to riot the place. I mean, you start taking away some of these modern day conveniences we have, and it's like the apocalypse has arrived. I mean, we're so far away from being able to deal without these comfortable commodities that we have because we don't constantly prepare ourselves for something like that. I'm thinking that we're going to see something pretty astronomically terrible happen eventually. I don't know when it's going to happen. I figure in my day I'm going to see something. I've not had to live with the constant things of wars. But I do think the next time something bad is going to happen, we may see it here on our soil. And I always think I want to be prepared for when that happens, to understand that, when I can't go to work because I got to defend the house, or we're in a militia type state because we're fixing to have to defend an invading army, or maybe we just have natural disasters that totally wipe out the grid, that I don't sit around and mope and cry and be depressed like the rest of the population that can't live without their cell phone. And I'm just going to grit my teeth and dig me a well somewhere and start pumping water out of it and have something to drink. Matter of fact, I got a well on my property. Of course, I am selling it. It's a good fresh well. And, we'll be able to survive and make it happen. I'm not a survivalist, but I did have a fresh well. Just hit me. As we move on, it talks about how she enriches. He can trust her. Verse 12. She brings him good, not harm. Oh, man, that's really good. All the days of her life. Woo! Brings him good all the days of her life. Now, that's tough. That's a extreme measuring stick right there. All the days of her life. Now, I'll be honest with you. I don't feel like I've got a great wife. A great wife. I've married up in the looks department. She's a lot better looking than me. She is a great home housekeeper. Do whatever you need to be done in the house. She is an entrepreneur. She has her own business. She lines up, when I start measuring her with some of these, she lines up really good with some of these Proverbs 31 characteristics. Don't tell her I told you that, because I want her to keep working hard. Get people lazy, get a big head. She brings him good. I couldn't think of any time that my wife's really brought me harm in my life at this point. I try to think, when did we've had a couple upsets. I remember when we first got married, we fought over watching something on TV, and I got pretty mad and threw that remote that one time. And we've had some disagreements, some pretty good disagreements, but I can't think of any time where she actually kind of was constructing any kind of harmful plan, like you see on the ID channel, Investigation Discovery, where somebody, they killed them, they had all this elaborate plan. If you watched any of that, I don't remember that. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. Verse 13. I thought this was a real tough one there for a while. She finds wool and flax and it busily spins it. Now, I had to really research that one because I haven't lived in the time where this is a prominent characteristic that you see in any women that I knew. My grandmother didn't say she crocheted and she knitted, I guess, but I think that was more of a hobby than a necessity that she did. Mom has told me in previous times about my grandmother making clothes for them, and they didn't go out and buy clothes. They actually made the clothes. But now, this is pretty interesting. She finds wool and flax and busily spins it. So my thing is, what is all this stuff? So these two things, wool and flax, are really common. They're pretty common. And, we may know what both of them are, but I really did think about looking up, okay, what are they? What really are they? I know what wool is. I kind of know what flax is, but what are they? Now, wool is the wavy undercoat of a sheep, right? It's not necessarily the top coat. It's the wavy undercoat of the sheep. It's woven into fabric, and what it does, it protects in the cold. So wool is for protection in the cold. Now, flax, what is flax? It's a fibrous plant, isn't it? It's kind of what you see on Survivor type shows where they get that flax or some kind of and they start woven, make their own little ropes and stuff out of it. It's kind of that nature, real stringy, fibrous type stuff. It's a fibrous plant used for spinning. They draw out the fibers and they twist it into yarn and they make linen. Its most famous and ideal from Egypt at that time was that flax coming from Egypt. So just as God cares for the promised land He has specifically selected for Israel, so must a wife of noble character select the wool and the flax she uses to make garments for her family. That is a whole lot of care to take because she is taking it for the summer and the winter here. This means so she carefully collects and gathers and cares for that which she will use to make garments for her family. She does not wait to have these things brought to her, but seeks after them, showing her willingness to work. Another interesting thing about the inclusion in this verse of both wool and flax is that wool is used to make outward garments, while flax is used to make inward garments. So the flax is for the inward garment, the wool is for the outward garment. This presents a great metaphor that both outward and inward acts are necessary. That this virtuous woman has to have inward acts and outward acts. So outward acts in this specific context would include such things as hearing the word, attending ordinances, and doing good works. Similarly, inward acts would include to fear God, have humility, have faith, hope, and love, and other graces. What this metaphor shows us is that these need to go together. The outward without the inward bring little spiritual profit. All right? Now, this is really easy to apply to all of us. The outward without the inward has very little profit, but the inward without the outward also is done in vain. Right? You can have all the great stuff on the inside, but it should bubble on out to the outside. I mean, what kind of Christian are you when you're just being the closet Christian and never saying anything and never spreading the gospel, never showing anybody love? You just keep it all to yourself. You're just one big alabaster treasure box that's just kept for sale one day or kept for the treasury, but is never being broken open and put to the master's feet. The woman described here seeks after the kingdom and the opportunity to do good as response to her inward godliness in peace, righteousness, and joy. Verse 14 tells us that she's like a merchant ship, bringing her food from afar. I always like when we start talking about food. Now, the merchant ship really opens up some interesting things. The merchant ships is what one translation uses. They don't travel short distance to find whatever's available on sale. They went to great distances to find the most unique commodities and special products that would command a premium price. The ship arriving back into the port with the most unusual and intriguing items would receive enthusiastic attention and build the reputation for the merchant. Proverbs 31:14 says she's like the merchant ships, the woman of economy. She's a woman of economy with regard to her husband, like a ship which comes from foreign countries, freighted with all kinds of wealth. She brings to her household this abundance of goods of all sorts under the name of food or bread. And if we comprehend it as provision in general, this verse might be paraphrased. She lays up in her house all sorts of provisions like a vessel which arriving from a long voyage brings all kinds of precious merchandise. John Gill commentary kind of lays out that when we look at the other interpretation, she's like merchant ships, like plural ships, many ships. She's not just like a single one, but like a whole navy of ships. She crosses the sea. She goes to the foreign parts. She comes back laden with rich goods. So the church of Christ is, and the true members. Now, John Gill and some others really open us up to some other things. I'm going to save that just for a second because we want to finish with some other ideas here. I'm going to finish with verse 15, but I've laid a groundwork for what I'm going to say here in a second. Verse 15 says, she gets up before dawn to prepare breakfast for her household and plan the day's work for her servant girls. Now, my wife doesn't get up before dawn and cook breakfast, but she does do some things that are very interesting that I think are very applicable to this verse. You could take it, my grandmother took this 100% literally, that she was the first one that was going to get up and she's cooking breakfast before anybody. I mean, what woke you up in the morning was the smell of the cooked breakfast. I mean, I can just imagine my grandmother had one son and her husband and 3 daughters, and I can just imagine my uncle waking up every morning to the smell of breakfast. I can imagine that it probably wasn't a big deal to him, but there were some mornings, because he had it every morning like that, there were some mornings he woke up and he goes, oh my gosh, I smell them eggs, I smell them biscuits, I'm ready to go. But just like if something's happening every day, you take it for granted. If I ever wake up and I smell breakfast cooked, it is like a super special day. I mean, and I think that's the way we need to look at this scripture. This virtuous woman makes every morning a unique, special morning because the way that you start the day really does dictate how the day will go. Does that make sense? I want to tell you, if you start the morning out bad, it'll be lunchtime before you got in. I mean, it's like you're climbing the hill all the way to lunchtime. And then you're just hoping about lunchtime things get better. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But usually a lot of times when the day starts off bad, it's going to be a tough day. She gets up before dawn, prepares breakfast, because you know why? She cares. She plans the day's workout for her servant girls. Now in my house, that would be her daughters. Right? She makes the chore list. Matter of fact, it's probably me. I may be her little servant girl. And she's got all kinds of stuff for me to do besides what stuff I want to do. I mean, I've always got a list. They were talking about doing something tomorrow with the girls. Her and the girls were going to go do something. It was going to cost money is all I knew. But I thought, if you're going to be gone, then maybe that means I don't have a list. But it probably doesn't mean I won't have a list. I'll probably have a list before she's gone. But she cares about the day. The point is she has this conscience that she cares about how every day goes, because you can't, I watched a movie last night. It's got a whole lot of Christian values in it. Breakthrough. It's a new Breakthrough. The little boy breaks through the ice, and I won't tell you the whole story, but it's really good. Yeah, really good movie. It's very recommendable if you want to go watch a movie. I won't say it's got to be Christian based, but I believe I heard Jesus mentioned a couple times in the movie, and so that would be Christian based, not faith based, right? We know the difference. Faith based means Jesus is not mentioned. Christian based means Jesus is mentioned. So I believe Jesus was mentioned several times. Great movie. I think it'd be really worth you watching it. As they say, it's a tearjerker. Me and Macy didn't cry, and they called us heartless. But we were adamant that we wouldn't cry through the movie. Melissa cried. I think Lily counted 7 times. So, and Lily cried 2 or 3 times. But we got to work on them girls a little bit more, get them a little unemotional. But Mom 7 times. So it's something that you may want to watch there. But Breakthrough was an interesting thing. The mother in that movie very much cared about how every day started. Every day. A virtuous woman will care about how the day starts. My wife doesn't prepare breakfast for us early in the morning. I wish she did. It would be pretty cool. She's probably not going to outwake me, because if she wakes up at 5, I'm waking up at 4. If she wakes up at 4, I'm going to wake up at 3. It's just in me to be like that. I've got to be, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. It's just the alpha and the omega. I mean, that's just a competition thing or something with me. So I'm all right with her not waking up at the same time, because she wakes up earlier. That means I'm gonna wake up earlier. Just the way it works. I mean, if you're gonna hold the big title, you got to do the big things. So, if I'm gonna call myself the alpha, then I've got to be a step above. Is the way I look at it in my household. But she does. When I come back in, I do a lot of things in the morning. Then I come back in, and she's got the girls up, and she's structuring them. And I'm going to tell you, I mean, they always eat. They always got breakfast. Now, what that breakfast is, may be cereal, it may be Pop-Tarts, it may be biscuits and gravy, it may be all kinds of good stuff. It's different days, different things. It may be fruit, it may be oatmeal. I mean, it's just all kinds of different stuff. Breakfast is a pretty important day. But she's structured them out, and she structures them out kind of at night before we go to bed. But then coming in, she's structuring them and getting them ready for a good day, a blessed day, because she cares. She cares about how the day goes. It's important. In that movie I was telling you about, Breakthrough, there was a teacher in there, and I don't want to give too much of that movie, but you can't get back yesterday, I think, is the little teacher's saying, but you can always do something about tomorrow. Right? I can't live for yesterday, but I can live for tomorrow. I can do something about the present and what's going to happen tomorrow. But yesterday I can't get back. So in that field, always cares. Now, as I'm closing here, we need to look at this too. I want to lay this framework, because my next level of study on this, I've kind of went through this text as deep as I can go from a personable type standpoint, as a personal relating to me, to women, to everybody personally. But I'm beginning my next tier of study is to look at this from a spiritual level. You won't find as many ideals out of the realm of you studying from a theological professor at college of maybe the different level of spiritual sense. I'm just going to be honest with you. The way that we look at it personally as characteristics of a virtuous woman, that sells. Let me be honest with you, that sells. That's what people want. They want the Bible to help them personally, right? I want the Bible to help me personally, right? It's attractive to me. This text is attractive to me from a personal standpoint, how it applies to me personally, how it applies to my little ladies in my life personally, and it attracts me. But then there's another deeper level of this that we may need to look at, that is the text talks about this husband and wife relationship. Because see, that's really where we get into this little issue, is this just about a woman or is this about a wife? Because obviously we want to present it as this is a woman that is being presented to a potential husband. These are the characteristics that a virtuous woman should have, but maybe this is also a virtuous wife, right? So if this is a virtuous wife, then it's in tense that she's already married to a husband, which makes her a wife. Well, when we look at it from that perspective, it may open up this new realm of spiritual possibilities of what this text is about. All right, so you ready for the cliffhanger, right? If this is a truly a virtuous wife, a virtuous woman that has married a husband, and this is a wife, that has all these characteristics. Well, we've got some small things. We look at Sarah in the Bible. She didn't really line up with Proverbs 31. Definitely, if we think about Rahab, she wasn't married, but she definitely doesn't line up. But if we look at Deborah, she didn't really line up either. If we look at Esther, she wasn't. She got some, but she ain't really lined up. If we look at Priscilla, if we look at the Samaritan woman at the well, these prominent women that God used in the Bible really doesn't necessarily line up with Proverbs 31. They don't match. I guess what we're saying is, I don't know that we'd call them virtuous women by these characteristics. Hence the struggle that we have here, especially if you're sitting in the seat as a woman. I don't measure up to this. This just, I can't, this is way above me. I can't, in other words, it's like as hard as I try, I can't get there, right? Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't pursue, right? Paul said, I have not attained perfection, but I'm pressing toward the mark. I'm getting closer. I'm going to get there one day when I lay down this old body. And basically, he said, when I get to heaven, I'll be there, right? But as long as I live this life, His grace was not bestowed on me in vain. But, here's where I want to open this up. From a spiritual context, if this is a wife and she's married to the husband, there is a very real spiritual connection here that husband's Jesus. And that wife is no more than the gospel church. That when we look at these virtuous characteristics of this woman, the writer is saying, this is the church. The church should have these characteristics. And the husband to that church is Jesus Christ. And the church should be virtuous in these ways. So that opens up a whole other realm of spiritual looking into how this should be applied. Now, if you want to take that, take just the merchant ships there. She's not a single one. She's a navy of these. All right? So the church of Christ and her true members, they're like ships of burden. They trade to heaven by prayer and other religious exercises. They return with riches of grace and mercy to help them in time of need. And though they have often difficult and dangerous passages as the merchant ships and are tossed with the tempest and are covered with the waves, Christ being their pilot, faith their sail, and hope is in their anchor. They weather the seas, they ride out all the storms, and they come safe home with their merchandise. She bringeth food from a far country, from Egypt probably particularly, from whence the corn that's used for bread, and for the word here it signifies was fetched and carried to ships to all various parts of the world. The allusion may be in a spiritual sense. It may mean that the churches bring her food or bread from heaven. the good land afar off, where God her Father and Christ her husband and her friends the angels are, with whom she carries on a correspondence, and from hence she has her food for her family, not from below the earth or on the earth, not in the dust, not the serpent's food, nor ashes on which the deceitful heart feeds, nor husk or the swine eat, but the corn from heaven, angels' food, the hidden heavenly manna, the bread of life, which comes down from heaven, the gospel of the grace of God, the good news from a far country she has. I mean, to be honest with you, what's going to hold your house together? McDonald's? All the organic food in my house won't keep my house together. I can feed my girls the best of the best. We can do it corn-fed beef. We can do organically raised chicken, organic eggs, fresh vegetables from our garden in the backyard. That the house that I'm selling has a garden fixing to be planted. That comes with a purchase. By the time it sells and you close, you'll have fresh beans to pick. Those won't hold my home together, or my relationships, or the church, or even this world. But heavenly manna from afar off, now that'll hold something together. That not only holds my house together, but it holds my church together. It holds my family together. Because really, I'll be honest with you, I got a little bitty family, but you're my family too. And I'm just as concerned about holding you together as I am my own family together. Right? I mean, as an associate pastor, I'm supposed to have a heart of a shepherd, right? Well, that's part of the heart of a shepherd. Is not only concerned about yours, but your whole family. Just not your immediate family, not your close bloodline, but all of your family. And have a shepherd's heart. So it opens up this whole new spiritual perspective that would be really good to study Proverbs 31 from this perspective of Jesus is the husband and his bride is the church. And guess what? So in that sense, all this is applicable to every one of us in this piece. Mm-hmm. So now I find myself needing to be cooking some breakfast in the morning before everybody gets up. I need to have some of these characters. Oh, it just got spin around on me. We've been pointing the finger at a woman all this time. Maybe I need to be pointing the finger at me. See, now that's not easily received. Because when you've been raised on Proverbs 31, the virtuous woman, all your life, that's all you think about is this is a woman text. And you never want to get to a higher spiritual level. But I want to tell you, you'll never get to another spiritual level as long as you just are not willing to hear what God says. Some of you say, well, I never heard that. Have you ever asked God about it? When I read Proverbs 31, I was so insecure about even talking about it because I wasn't a woman. And God's continued to open me up about this because it was for me. It was for me. First of all, I can show you just from the straight text. It opens up. This is mama talking to son. And we see these characteristics of this great bride. And now, if I go even deeper with my theology and trying to dig deeper beyond the things that I heard in my Bible Belt raising that I have here, which is wonderful. I'm not discrediting it, but I'm trying to go further. I'm trying to push. I'm trying to go deeper. You know, somebody says, well, you know, so-and-so just preaches a fabulous message. I've never heard anything. You know how they preach things that you've never heard before? Because they push themselves to go to another level with God that they never thought was possible. Beyond what the internet can tell you, beyond what another preacher can preach to you. Something that is just personable and from God. I will tell you, till you're willing to go beyond the boundaries that are set intellectually in your life, scripturally, it's hard to get there. Till you're willing to say, you know what? If this needs to be tore down and pushed on out, God, just expand my territory. Right? What was the prayer of Jabez was so popular like 20 years ago now. And all that prayer said was, God, just expand my territory. Just expand my boundaries. And we never understood that in order to expand boundaries, it's going to be painful. If there's walls already built up, you got to tear them down. That's a lot of work. You ever tore anything down that's a wall, my gosh. Especially if it was built a long time ago. Things that were built a long time ago that are still there are solid. They're solid. You know, so sometimes when we talk about this little cliffhanger, it's to expand you, push on. It's 10 till, we've got to stop. God bless you. So happy you're here.